23rd October, 1764. Dawn breaks reluctantly over the Ganges plain near Buxar, a fortified town in Bihar. The river mist clings to the ground like cannon smoke yet to come. Major Hector Munro of the 89th Foot stands before 7,000 men. British regulars, sepoys, and cavalry formed in 3 disciplined columns. Before them, across the flat expanse, 40,000 troops mass under the banners of 3 powers: the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II himself, Shuja-ud-Daula, the Nawab of Awadh, and Mir Qasim, the deposed Nawab of Bengal. 133 pieces of artillery glint in the emerging light. The mathematical reality is inescapable, nearly 6-to-1 odds. 4 months earlier, Munro had executed 20 mutinous sepoys by blowing them from guns, a brutal assertion of discipline that nearly destroyed his command before it began. Now those same regiments must hold against an impossible assault. If they break, Bengal falls. The East India Company's entire position in India collapses. 2 centuries of subsequent history hang upon the next 12 hours. Yet today, the name Hector Munro barely registers in British military consciousness. No monuments commemorate him in London. No schoolchildren learn of Buxar as they do of Plassey or Waterloo. This Scottish Highland laird, who commanded one of the most consequential victories in imperial history, has been almost entirely forgotten, overshadowed by Robert Clive, eclipsed by later defeats, and buried beneath the uncomfortable complexities of company rule. But on that October morning in 1764, as Mirza Najaf Khan's Mughal cavalry began their advance at daybreak, one question dominated: could discipline, tactics, and the cold calculations of European warfare overcome sheer numerical superiority? The answer would determine not merely the fate of a battle, but the trajectory of an empire. This is the story of Britain's forgotten victory, and the Highland officer who delivered it. Hector Munro was born around 1726 at Novar House in Ross, Scotland, a land of mist-shrouded glens and clan loyalties. His father, Hugh Munro, was the 7th Laird of Novar, a family of modest Highland gentry navigating the dangerous politics of post-Jacobite Scotland. The failed 1745 rebellion hung like a pall over Highland society. Loyalty to the Hanoverian crown was not merely political calculation, but survival strategy. Young Hector's first military action came at the Battle of Little Ferry on 15th April, 1746, where the Golspie militia fighting for the government defeated Jacobite forces in Sutherland. He was barely 20. This early choice of loyalties would define his career. Munro would always be a king's man, a professional soldier in an age when Highland identity was being systematically dismantled and reconstituted in service to the British state. According to family tradition, Munro's first commission came through fortune's intervention. Whilst traveling alone through Sutherland, he encountered the Duchess of Gordon, whose drunken coachman had lost control. Munro took the reins and delivered her to safety. The grateful Duchess used her considerable influence to secure him a lieutenant's commission in the 34th Cumberland Regiment of Foot. Whether apocryphal or not, the story captures a truth. Advancement required patronage, and Munro proved adept at cultivating it. His early career followed the rhythms of peacetime soldiering garrison duty, drilling, the tedium of provincial postings. He transferred between regiments, the 34th, the 48th Foot, the 70th Foot. By 1753, now a captain, he received orders to Badenoch with 3 squadrons of dragoons to apprehend Jacobite rebels still hiding in the Highlands. The task proved education in ruthlessness. Munro successfully captured John Du Cameron, known as Sergeant Moore, a notorious rebel who was promptly executed in Perth. He also hunted Ewan Macpherson of Cluny, though Macpherson evaded capture through clever disguise. Clan tradition claims Macpherson dressed as a groom and held Munro's horse whilst soldiers searched his house. Some versions suggest Munro recognized him and deliberately allowed the escape with a knowing wink, a Highland officer's coded acknowledgement of shared heritage. True or not, these operations taught Munro the delicate balance between duty and discretion, between following orders and navigating the moral complexities of suppressing one's own people. In 1759, Munro's career took its decisive turn. He was appointed junior major in the newly raised 89th Highland Regiment of Foot, one of several Highland units the company was recruiting for service in India. The East India Company's private army was expanding rapidly, and Scottish officers were prized for their reputation as disciplined, hardy fighters. The regiment assembled at Gordon Castle in December, and by the following year embarked from Portsmouth for the East Indies. The voyage to India lasted nearly a year. When the 89th arrived in Bombay in November 1761, Munro encountered a world that would test everything he thought he understood about warfare. The company's territories were a patchwork of trading posts and recent conquests. Native sepoy regiments far outnumbered European troops. Disease killed more men than combat. The climate was punishing, the distances vast, and the political intrigues Byzantine in their complexity. For 2 years, the regiment moved between stations without fixed assignment Bombay, then gradually eastward toward Bengal. Munro observed, learned, and adapted. He studied how sepoys fought, how Indian rulers made war, how the monsoon dictated campaign seasons. He noted the crucial importance of artillery in Indian warfare, where massed cannon could offset numerical superiority. Most importantly, he learned that company officers operated in a moral universe, distinctly different from European battlefields. Here, warfare mixed with commerce. Military decisions had immediate economic consequences, and the line between soldier and administrator blurred into irrelevance. By 1763, the situation in Bengal had deteriorated catastrophically. Mir Qasim, installed as Nawab by the British to replace the pliable Mir Jafar, had proven dangerously independent. He strengthened his military, modernized his administration, and resented the company's trading privileges that undermined his revenues. When the company demanded ever more concessions, Mir Qasim made a calculation. Alliance with other Indian powers offered better odds than submission. A strong detachment of the 89th under Major Munro joined the company army under Major John Carnac near Patna. Then came the crisis that would define Munro's reputation and nearly destroy his command before the decisive battle. In August 1764, as Munro assumed overall command, a formidable mutiny erupted amongst the sepoy battalions. The causes were complex: irregular pay, promises broken, resentment at European officers, and perhaps encouragement from Mir Qasim's agents. Hundreds of sepoys refused orders. The entire army teetered on the edge of dissolution. Munro's response was immediate and horrifying. He ordered 24 ringleaders seized, bound to the mouths of cannon, and blown apart before the assembled regiments. The execution method, blowing from guns, was deliberately theatrical. The victim tied spread-eagled across the cannon's mouth, the powder charge fired, the body literally disintegrating. It was meant to inspire terror, and it succeeded. Contemporary sources vary on the exact number executed. Some say 20, others 24, but all agree on the impact. Discipline was restored with appalling brutality. The sepoy regiments, shocked and cowed, fell back into his self-line. Yet Munro had gambled everything on this demonstration. If the sepoys had risen in response, if European troops had proven insufficient, the entire Bengal army would have collapsed. Instead, the calculated ruthlessness worked. The regiments marched north to confront the Allied Indian forces massing at Buxar. Munro was now 58 years old. He had spent 3 decades in military service, rising through patronage and competence from Highland militia to company major. He commanded men who feared him, obeyed him, but could not be said to love him. He understood Indian warfare better than most European officers, but remained fundamentally a Highland professional, schooled in linear tactics and volley fire. As October approached and intelligence reported the vast Allied army concentrating at Buxar, Munro faced the challenge that would prove his legacy or end his career. The strategic situation offered no good options. He could not retreat without abandoning Bengal to invasion. He could not delay. The Allied army grew stronger daily. He must attack, outnumbered nearly 6-1, and win decisively. Everything he had learned in Scotland, everything he had absorbed in 3 years of Indian service, everything he had purchased with the blood of 24 executed sepoys, all of it would be tested on the plains of Bihar. The army marched north. Buxar waited. The town of Buxar sat on the northern bank of the Ganges, approximately 130 kilometers west of Patna, a strong fortified town in contemporary descriptions, though its fortifications would play no role in the coming battle. The terrain was characteristic of the Bihar plain, flat, open ground, ideal for cavalry maneuver and artillery deployment. The monsoon had ended. The ground was firm. Weather would not decide this engagement. By mid-October, Munro's scouts reported the full magnitude of the opposing force. Shah Alam II, the Mughal emperor himself, had marched from Delhi with the imperial army, a force that still commanded respect if no longer terror. Shuja-ud-Daula, Nawab of Awadh and Grand Vizier to the emperor, brought his own substantial forces from Lucknow. Mir Qasim arrived with the remains of his Bengali army and 3 million rupees worth of gemstones to fund the campaign. Together they fielded over 40,000 men and 133 pieces of artillery. Against this, Munro commanded 17,072 men, 1,859 British regulars, 5,297 Indian sepoys, and 9,189 Indian cavalry. In artillery, he was significantly outgunned. His advantage lay entirely in discipline, training, and tactical cohesion. Munro divided his force into 3 sections. A classic company formation that allowed mutual support whilst maintaining flexibility. The left flank under Major Stibbert comprised regular European troops and a sepoy battalion with attached artillery. The center, commanded by Major Champion, held the strongest European contingent and additional sepoys. Munro personally commanded the right division with mixed European and sepoy formations. The strategy was straightforward. Form square or line as circumstances demanded. Maintain volley discipline and use the superior rate of fire that European musketry provided. The sepoys, if they held, would match their opposite numbers. The cavalry would screen and pursue. Everything depended on the infantry squares remaining unbroken. 23rd October. Munro formed his divisions before dawn. Contemporary accounts described the eerie quiet as 40,000 men prepared for battle across the plain. At daybreak, Mirza Najaf Khan, commanding the Mughal right flank, advanced his forces first. This was the critical moment. The Allied plan appears to have been simultaneous assault from multiple directions, overwhelming the British through sheer numbers before European musketry could inflict decisive casualties. But coordination failed almost immediately. Najaf Khan's cavalry and infantry moved forward whilst the center and left divisions remained stationary, watching. Munro reacted with remarkable speed. Within 20 minutes, military observers later marveled at the precision the British lines formed and began controlled volley fire. The Mughal advance staggered, then halted, then began to pull back. European eyewitness accounts describe sepoy steadiness under fire as the crucial factor. Had the sepoy battalions broken, the Mughal cavalry would have rolled through the position. Instead, they held. By mid-morning, the battle had moved from Mughal offensive to British counterattack. Munro's cavalry, composed largely of Indian Sowar troops under company officers, began pressing the Mughal flanks. The center division advanced, maintaining formation and firing disciplined volleys. The left flank held position, preventing any attempt to envelop. Contemporary British accounts, and here we must acknowledge their bias, describe almost methodical destruction. Historian John William Fortescue later noted that the Mughal forces suffered approximately 2,000 killed, whilst the British casualties stood at 847. 39 Europeans killed and 64 wounded from the regular regiments, and 250 killed, 435 wounded, and 85 missing from the sepoy battalions. The disparity reflects both musket effectiveness and the psychology of 18th-century Indian warfare. Once the Allied offensive stalled, morale collapsed. Shuja-ud-Daula, watching his attack fail, made a devastating decision. He blew up his powder magazines and boat bridge across the Ganges, then retreated westward with his Awadh forces. The explosion's massive tumbrils of gunpowder deliberately ignited created chaos and made orderly withdrawal impossible. Shah Alam II, the Mughal emperor, found himself abandoned by his Grand Vizier. Mirza Najaf Khan reformed what remained of the imperial forces around the emperor, but recognized the hopelessness of continued fighting. As Munro's divisions advanced across the field, Najaf Khan chose negotiation over annihilation. Mir Qasim fled with his fortune and disappeared into impoverished obscurity. He would die in poverty in 1777, his jewels long since spent. Shuja-ud-Daula retreated to Awadh, pursued by company forces. Shah Alam, the last Mughal emperor to command armies in battle, became effectively a British prisoner. By midday on 23 October 1764, the Battle of Buxar was over. The victors captured 133 pieces of artillery and over 1 million rupees in cash. But the strategic prize far exceeded these material gains. In 12 hours of fighting, Munro had achieved what Plassey had only begun. The British East India Company was now the paramount power in northern India. The Mughal emperor, nominal ruler of the subcontinent, negotiated from a position of complete dependency. The richest province in India, Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, lay at company mercy. Major Munro's official dispatch, dated 27 October, is a masterpiece of understatement. "The signal victory you gained," the Calcutta Council replied, "so as at one blow, utterly to defeat the designs of the enemy against these provinces, is an event which does so much honor to yourself, sir, in particular, and to all the officers and men under your command, and which, at the same time, is attended with such particular advantages to the company, as call upon us to return you our sincere thanks." For this important service, Munro received immediate promotion to brevet lieutenant colonel. Yet even in this moment of triumph, complications emerged. The victory was too complete, too consequential. Robert Clive, the company's political mastermind and twice governor of Bengal, would soon return to India to negotiate the subsequent treaties. Clive would harvest the diplomatic fruits of Munro's military success, and Clive's fame would overshadow the man who delivered the victory. Modern military historians studying Buxar emphasize several factors beyond simple British superiority. First, the Allied forces failed utterly in coordination, 3 separate armies operating with distinct commands and conflicting objectives. Second, the decision to fight on open ground favored European linear tactics. Had the Allies forced battle near fortifications or rough terrain, the outcome might have differed substantially. Third, the sepoy battalion's steadiness, so recently cowed by executions, proved unexpectedly decisive. Some historians note uncomfortable questions. Did the 24 executed sepoys purchase not merely discipline but terror sufficient to prevent any thought of breaking? Did Munro's brutal assertion of authority create a regiment that fought from fear rather than loyalty? The records cannot answer definitively, but the timing suggests the execution's psychological impact extended directly into the battle. The battlefield itself today reveals little of that October day. The Ganges still flows, the plains remain flat and open, but no monuments mark where formations stood or where 2,000 men died. Local memory has largely forgotten, unsurprising, given that from the Indian perspective, Buxar represented the triumph of foreign mercenaries over indigenous rulers, the consolidation of a commercial entity's military dominance. Yet the battle's consequences rippled forward through history. Within a year, the Treaty of Allahabad would grant the Company Diwani rights the authority to collect revenue on behalf of the Mughal emperor. This seemingly bureaucratic concession transformed the company from trading firm to territorial power. Munro's victory made possible the administrative structures that would evolve into British India. The cruel irony is that Munro himself gained relatively little from this success. Promoted to lieutenant colonel, appointed briefly as commander-in-chief of Bengal, he returned to Scotland in 1768 and entered Parliament as member for Inverness Burghs. His career would continue, but Buxar remained his defining moment and, increasingly, a moment history chose to forget. The immediate consequences of Buxar unfolded with bureaucratic precision. In August 1765, Robert Clive negotiated 2 treaties at Allahabad. Shah Alam II, the Mughal emperor, granted the Company Diwani rights over Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, the right to collect taxes and administer revenue in the empire's richest provinces. In exchange, the company agreed to pay the emperor 26 lakh rupees annually and defend his territories against external threats. This was the constitutional fiction that masked reality. The emperor became a company pensioner. Sovereignty transferred in all but name, and the Mughal Empire's long decline accelerated toward its inevitable end. Clive structured these arrangements, but they rested entirely on Munro's military success at Buxar. Without that victory, no treaty could have extracted such concessions. Yet, history remembers Clive, not Munro. Why? Part of the answer lies in personality. Clive was a political operator of genius, manipulative, charismatic, and ruthlessly effective at self-promotion. Munro was a professional soldier, Highland Scottish, without political ambition beyond securing his seat in Parliament. Clive courted publicity. Munro returned to his estates. Clive's victories at Plassey and his role in establishing company rule made compelling narratives. Munro's technically superior military achievement at Buxar lacked dramatic flair. Furthermore, Munro's later career provided no additional heroics to cement his reputation. He invested in the ill-fated Air Bank of Douglas, Heron and Company, which collapsed in the financial crisis of 1772. The resulting financial embarrassment likely explains why, in 1778, he returned to India to command the East India Company's Madras Army. This second Indian career began well. In late 1778, Munro successfully captured Pondicherry from the French, securing British control of the Coromandel coast. But the Anglo-French conflict proved merely prelude to a far more dangerous confrontation, the Second Anglo-Mysore War against Hyder Ali. Hyder Ali, illiterate, brilliant, ruthless, had made Mysore the most formidable military power in southern India. Unlike earlier opponents, he understood European warfare and adapted effectively. His forces combined cavalry mobility with artillery firepower and excellent intelligence. Most critically, he recognized British weaknesses: overextension, reliance on sepoy loyalty, and vulnerability during monsoon seasons. In September 1780, disaster struck. Colonel William Bailey, marching to join Munro at Conjeeveram, encountered Tipu Sultan Hyder Ali's son with 10,000 men and 18 guns at Polalur, also called Perambakam. The battle that followed destroyed Bailey's force almost completely. Tipu's tactics combined cavalry and artillery assault overwhelmed British formations. Nearly the entire force was killed or captured. Munro, waiting at Conjeeveram, received the news with growing horror. His reputation for quick decision-making appeared to fail him. Contemporary accounts note he remained motionless in his camp for 3 days after learning of Bailey's danger before attempting relief. The reasons remain unclear, perhaps poor intelligence, perhaps age, he was now 54, perhaps the cautious hesitation that sometimes afflicts commanders after earlier success. The defeat forced Munro to fall back on Street Thomas Mount, relinquishing hard-won territory. Sir Eyre Coote arrived to assume command, and whilst Munro participated creditably in Coote's subsequent victory at Porto Novo in 1781, he was no longer the decisive figure. In November 1781, he captured Negapatam, but by 1782, aged 56, he retired permanently to Scotland. Why Munro's failure against Hyder Ali has remained more memorable than his triumph at Buxar reveals much about historical memory. Defeat is often more dramatic than victory. The disaster at Pollilur, European troops overwhelmed by an Indian ruler's innovative tactics, challenged British assumptions of inherent superiority. It proved newsworthy in ways that Buxar's more conventional triumph did not. Munro returned to Novar, his Highland estate, and resumed his parliamentary duties. In 1782, he commissioned the Fyrish Monument on a hill overlooking his lands, a structure deliberately resembling an Indian gate, allegedly modeled on Negapatam. Local tradition holds he built it to provide employment for destitute locals, though cynics suggest vanity played a role. The monument stands today, visible for miles, a curious oriental flourish on a Scottish hillside. In 1787, he received the colonelcy of the 42nd Royal Highland Regiment, the famous Black Watch, a position he held until his death. He served continuously in Parliament until 1802, representing Inverness burghs for over 3 decades, though much of that time he spent in India. His personal life was unconventional. He never married but fathered 4 natural children by different mothers. His eldest son, Hector Sutherland Munro, joined the East India Company as a cadet in 1792, but was killed by a tiger on Saugur Island en route to Madras, a tragedy that spawned numerous Staffordshire pottery figures depicting the death of Munro. 2 other sons also died young. His daughter Jane married and eventually passed the Novar estate to her descendants. Sir Hector Munro died on 27 December 1805 at Novar House, aged approximately 79. No great monuments were raised. No state funeral occurred. The Dictionary of National Biography would give him a brief entry. Military histories would mention him primarily in connection with Buxar, often subordinate to discussions of Clive's subsequent diplomacy. Modern historians have attempted reassessment. John William Fortescue's monumental History of the British Army praises the tactical execution at Buxar, whilst noting Munro's later failures. Military scholars studying the evolution of company warfare acknowledge Buxar as the battle that confirmed British dominance in northern India, more strategically significant than Plassey, though less famous. Yet Munro remains forgotten by broader British public memory. No schools bear his name. No popular histories celebrate his achievement. The executions at Patna remain controversial, complicating any simple heroic narrative. The defeat at Pollilur provides counter-evidence to claims of military genius, and most damagingly, Clive's shadow is simply too long. There's a certain justice in this obscurity. Munro was not a pleasant man. He ordered 24 men, blown from guns, to enforce discipline, an act that succeeds through terror. He participated in the imperial project at its most exploitative moment, when the company transitioned from trading to territorial conquest. He fought battles that extended British control over populations who had not sought such governance. Yet within the context of military history bracketing larger questions of imperialism's legitimacy, Munro deserves recognition as a remarkably effective commander. He understood that European linear tactics, applied with sufficient discipline, could overcome numerical superiority. He grasped the importance of sepoy morale and acted decisively, if brutally, to maintain it. He fought Buxar with cold professional competence, achieving a victory that fundamentally altered the balance of power in India. Modern military analysts occasionally cite Buxar when studying coalition warfare and the importance of unified command. The Allied forces' failure to coordinate attacks provided Munro the advantage he exploited. Staff colleges sometimes use Buxar as a case study in achieving victory against numerical superiority through superior discipline and tactical cohesion. But these are specialist discussions. The general public, asked to name British victories in India, mentions Plassey perhaps, or later engagements in the mutiny. Buxar remains obscure. Munro remains forgotten. The Novar estate still exists in Easter Ross, though the direct Munro line ended long ago. The Fyrish Monument remains a local landmark, that incongruous Indian-style gateway crowning a Scottish hill, visible to travelers on the A9. Few who see it know what it commemorates or who built it. Historians occasionally debate whether Buxar or Plassey deserves recognition as the truly decisive battle in establishing British India. Plassey was dramatic, a puppet Nawab installed through conspiracy. Buxar was conclusive, the Mughal emperor himself defeated, sovereignty effectively transferred. One makes better narrative, the other achieved more strategic consequence. William Dalrymple, writing about company rule, notes that Buxar confirmed what Plassey had suggested, that European military tactics, applied systematically by professional soldiers, could overcome vastly larger Indian armies. This was not inherent superiority. Hyder Ali would prove that decisively at Paulalure, but rather a specific tactical advantage that held under specific conditions. The moral complexity cannot be ignored. We study Munro's achievement whilst acknowledging he fought to expand company control over territories whose inhabitants had no voice in the matter. We note his tactical brilliance, whilst remembering the 24 men executed before the battle. We recognize Buxar's strategic importance whilst understanding its role in establishing a colonial system that would persist for nearly 2 centuries. Military history is not moral philosophy. It studies how battles are won and lost, how commanders make decisions under uncertainty, how tactical systems evolve and adapt. By these standards, Munro merits attention. A professional officer who executed a difficult operation with notable skill, achieving victory through discipline, speed of decision-making, and effective use of combined arms. Yet military history exists within larger contexts. The British Empire's expansion into India involved extraordinary violence, economic exploitation, and political subjugation. Munro was an agent of this process. His victories enabled subsequent conquests. His career exemplified the company officer, part soldier, part administrator, part profit-seeker. Perhaps Munro's obscurity reflects a certain cultural unease. Heroes require uncomplicated narratives. Munro's story is thoroughly complicated. Highland Scot, serving the Hanoverian crown, professional soldier in a commercial army, tactical victor whose subsequent defeat tarnished his reputation, executor of brutal discipline whose methods succeeded through terror. Modern Britain, grappling with its imperial past, finds figures like Clive sufficiently dramatic to merit sustained attention. Controversial, yes, but undeniably significant. Munro offers fewer purchase points for memory. He was competent rather than charismatic, successful but not transformative, important but not indispensable. Yet on that October day in 1764, on the plain at Buxar, with 7,000 men facing 40,000, Munro delivered the victory that made British India possible. Everything that followed, the Diwani, the Governor-Generals, the Raj itself, rested on those 12 hours of disciplined musketry. History forgets. That is its nature. The famous overshadow the competent, the dramatic eclipses the effective, the last act replaces memory of earlier triumphs. Hector Munro commanded one of the most consequential victories in British military history, and today his name means nothing to the nation he served. Perhaps that is appropriate. Perhaps obscurity is the fate deserved by those who build empires. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it is worth remembering that Britain's military dominance in India began not with Clive's conspiracy at Plassey, but with a Highland officer's cold competence at Buxar, where discipline, tactics, and 24 executed sepoys delivered an empire. The miracle at Buxar was no miracle. It was professional soldiering at its most effective and most morally compromised. We study it to understand how power operates, how battles are won, and how history chooses whom to remember and whom to forget. Sir Hector Munro, 8th Laird of Navarre, victor of Buxar, died on 27th December, 1805. His monument stands on a Scottish hillside. His victory changed history. His name is forgotten. Thus are empires built, and thus do builders fade into silence.